Hello, I'm Paul Single, Managing Director here at City National Rochdale. Welcome to the second installment on our topic with trade with China. This time we'll focus on tariffs. If you missed part one, be sure to check it out. Tariffs are a tax that are applied to imports. They're used by governments to protect domestic industries, address trade imbalances, retaliate against unfair trade practices, and collect tax revenue. Historically, tariffs were a major source of revenue for the federal government since the country's beginning up until 1913. That's when the 16th Amendment was ratified and the federal government was granted the right to impose a federal income tax. The Constitution grants Congress the ability to impose tariffs, but since the 1930s, Congress has delegated more of that trade authority to the President. Since the end of World War II, tariffs have fallen to the sidelines as free trade has become modus operandi. As the economic benefits have shifted toward efficiencies of free trade and less government interference for businesses and the consumer. Economists don't tend to favor tariffs for many reasons. Primarily, tax policy changes should aim to boost growth and competitiveness. Tariffs don't tend to do that. A tariff is a tax that increases the price of the item, which is inflationary. And the consumer is usually the one who has to pay that tax, which is a regressive impact, because disproportionately it's going to impact those at the lower end of the income spectrum. The tax is hidden. The consumer does not know how much of the higher price is due to the tariff and how much of it is due to the retailer using the tariff as an excuse to increase the profit margin on their sale. Tariffs can make domestic producers less efficient and innovative by reducing the competition. Finally, tariffs can cause retaliation by hurting exporters, and it can quickly turn into a trade war. Now, the other side of the coin is taking center stage. Foreign producers have been accused of using unfair trade practices to help lower the prices of their items. Imports of lower-priced goods in the 1990s and early 2000s exploded with growth, widening the trade deficit. The cheaper-priced imports helped reduce inflationary pressures from the 3% range to 1%. But at the same time, it made it difficult for domestic manufacturers to compete on price, and they had to reduce or cease operations, laying off many workers. It is becoming clearer that although free trade benefits consumers with lower costs, and some businesses with higher profit margins due to lower production costs, but it has hurt many American workers, mostly in the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing represents about 11% of GDP. More importantly, it is one of the highest multiplying effects of any sector in the economy. For each dollar spent on manufacturing, it triggers a chain reaction of increased material purchases, job creation, and further economic expansion. This is why tariffs have become a major political tool. Most importantly is that it's an important political issue in the Midwestern industrial states, the same states that will likely decide the upcoming presidential election. Both Presidents Donald Trump and Joe Biden have used tariffs as a method of supporting domestic industries amid an economic confrontation with China. It started in 2018 when the Trump administration imposed tariffs by executive order because the imports of washers and solar cells and modules were considered to have serious negative impact on domestic manufacturers. Generally speaking, the Biden administration preserved the Trump administration's tariffs on steel, aluminum, and the majority of goods from China. They increased some tariffs on green technology and reduced or eliminated many of the newly enacted tariffs on our close allies. Let's take a look at some of the charts to get a better understanding. This chart shows the amount of goods imported each calendar year. You can see how in the early 1990s, the United States imported about $500 million worth of goods each year. Last year, it was more than $3 trillion. That's about a six-fold increase. The most impressive gain was 2000 to 2010, right after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. With all those imported goods, the demand for domestic goods fell helping to cause a decline in manufacturing employment. This chart shows the number of U.S. workers in the field of manufacturing. It peaked at almost 20 million in the late 1970s and has since declined to about 13 million. The sharpest decline was in the decade from 2000 to 2010, with a loss of 5.7 million jobs. That's a drop of about 1/3. This was devastating to many households and communities. Because of that devastation, tariffs became a new tool in combating issues of trade. This chart here shows the tariff revenue coming into the United States Treasury. It's about $75 billion for the last 12 months. That's more than double the amount it was before the first tariff was put in place by the Trump administration in January 2018. It's a very large tax increase. Although it sounds like a big number, for the federal government, it's not. The receipts from income taxes are 32 times bigger, for example. Tariffs do not provide a meaningful share of revenue to the country, and they can't. But you can see in the light blue shaded area, it accounts for less than 2% of the receipts coming into the federal government. So in this chart here, you can see the ramping up of the tariffs during the Trump administration, and that the Biden administration pretty much maintained those same levels. To put this in perspective, this chart shows in the light blue line what China's tariff is on imports from the United States. And the shaded area at the bottom is the net difference between the two. And you can see, on average, their tariffs are about 2.5 percentage points higher than the United States. This chart shows that tariffs are having an impact. It shows the amount of goods imported from China since 2010. There's a light blue vertical line when the first Trump administration's tariff was put in place. There's a dotted trend line of the period from 2010 to 2017, shortly before the tariffs went in place. Since then, the amount of goods being imported has started to decline. They did recover following the recession, but that was due to the surging demand of goods when we're at the stay-in-home period. As of today, imports have declined by $9.5 billion and are down 21% from December 2017, the month before the first tariff was put in place. This chart shows the goods imported from many of our major trading partners. It is a rolling sum of the past 12 months, and this helps smooth out the data for easy comparison. The largest source comes from the European Union in the blue-gray line. It has been the largest source of imports since December 2022, when they surpassed China. It is followed by the Pacific Rim, which excludes China, Mexico, China, and then Canada. China, in the thick black line, peaked in September 2022 and has been declining ever since. China now accounts for 13.2% of all goods imported into the United States. That's below the 15.8% level it was before the tariff started. Looking forward, Trump's approach to tariffs is considered a very broad protectionist plan. He is promising to ratchet up his trade war to a higher degree. He calls for a 10% universal tariff, also very high tariffs on Chinese imports, and extremely large tariffs on electric vehicles. There has also been talk of higher levies on certain countries that devalue their currency. As for the Harris platform, we don't know much about it yet, but we will assume that it will generally follow the same path that the Biden administration had, which was a more tactical approach to rebuild domestic manufacturing and investing in green transition. The bottom line is this: when adding a new tax, there are some that benefit and some that will get hurt. For example, a tariff on steel imports may help out the steel industry, but any manufacturer that uses steel now has a higher input cost. There's also the risk of a retaliatory tariff that may hurt a domestic exporter. Global trade is complicated. What needs to happen is a comprehensive trade policy. Thank you for watching. I'm Paul Singal, and I'll see you next month.